Good morning, everyone, and welcome to First Take. Bristol, Connecticut, carry champion Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith.
How are you?
What's up, man?
Good to see you.
How's
How
it
you
going?
doing? I'm good, all right. I'm doing all right. Thank y'all for
That's
asking.
the last nice thing I'm going to say to him.
For the rest of the show? I understand. Well, on the show today, ahead of the NBA lottery tonight, there's talk about free agency trades and low-key disputes during the season that could leave the Clippers and the Bulls without each of their superstars. We'll try to hash that all out. Plus, Ryan Tannehill is the first of his quarterback class to get a deal. The franchise says he's their guy moving forward. Kinda. Surprised or not surprised? Maybe, maybe not. Somebody's kind of weighing in already. But first, let's get to our top ick. Let's discuss the Clippers. Sources are telling Fox Sports that DeAndre Jordan, who is a free agent this summer, might leave as tensions grow with he and Chris Paul. Apparently, Chris Paul, the player coach that he is, has been tough on Jordan when it comes to his commitment, or what appears to be his lack of commitment, to improve his free throw shooting. Paul's complaints include not working enough with the shooting coach. Sources say the two have had issues all season long. Again, DeAndre Jordan, a free agent this summer. Stephen A., hash this all out for us. What do you think is going on here?
Well, first of all, I reached out to several sources within the Clippers organization over the last couple of days, and obviously in the aftermath of them losing on Sunday, particularly yesterday. Here's the deal. Chris Paul is Chris Paul. Chris Paul is this type of person. He's the point guard. He's the leader. He's the franchise, one of the two franchise players. He's the $100 million man. And Chris Paul is the type of dude that's going to get all up in your face. And he is going to let you know when you are not doing the kind of things that you are supposed to be doing to facilitate this team winning basketball games. And Skip Bayless, the report, while accurate, all right, on the part of Fox, is somewhat incomplete, because it's not just DeAndre Jordan that has had a problem with Chris Paul. It is also Blake Griffin. Now, Blake Griffin goes into the sunset and he does his little Kia commercials and all of that stuff. I should say little, because Kia is a big deal. But the point that I'm trying to make to you is that at one point in time in the season, both Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, from what my sources tell me, were so disgusted with Chris Paul that they tried to tune him out. But Chris Paul has the support of the owner. He has the support of the coach. He has the support of the coaching staff. And it is not just because he's the umbilical cord of the head coach on the floor, but it's also because, by and large, he produces. And in the case of DeAndre Jordan, Chris Paul walked into this season, looked at the roster, looked at the absence of depth, knowing that he was going to have not just the responsibilities offensively, but the toughest defensive assignments, because he has to stick Steph Curry, even though when it's on defense, Klay Thompson is the one sticking him. He had to stick Tony Parkers of the world. He had to stick to Russell Westbrooks of the world, etc., etc. So Chris Paul knew how taxing and what a challenge it was going to be on him. And he was in a situation where he was not hesitant at all to hold other guys accountable. Ultimately, fences mended. Wasn't that big of a deal years ago with the supposed rift between him and Blake Griffin. It wasn't like that this time around. But with DeAndre Jordan, according to what I'm being told, it never fully went away. DeAndre Jordan's attitude has been throughout the year, well, we'll see what happens once I become a free agent. Now, let me say this. Having said all of that, this is simply about two players, very good at what they do, but Chris Paul's the star and Chris Paul's going to hold you accountable. Let me say this to DeAndre Jordan. You never averaged in double digits in points nor rebounds until the last 2 years. That would coincide with Chris Paul being there. In each of your last 3 years, you have never shot better than 42% from the free throw line. So, in the end, when you look at the fact that he's shooting better than 66% from the field, well, what's that coming from? That's coming from dunks, because he has no post game. DeAndre Jordan has no post game, which means it's usually via alley-oops, courtesy of Chris Paul. So you can leave and go to some place where you're going to get less, or you could stay, get as much money as you richly deserve, while at the same time playing with one of the elite point guards in the game.
So you would stay?
If I'm DeAndre Jordan, without hesitation, I would stay, because it's the best situation for him because of the point guard he's playing with, who's a quintessential point guard. He's not a shoot-first point guard. Not to mention that being in Los Angeles, since that's the team that you're on and has your bird rights, you can end up staying with them and getting more money and a longer-term deal. So it works on both ends. This stuff will pass. It better pass if he's smart.
lot of chatter about DeAndre Jordan going to the Dallas Mavericks.
Yep.
He's from the state of Texas, obviously from the Houston area,
Yep.
played at Texas A&M. Now, for reasons I can't explain, Michael Irvin is close to DeAndre Jordan and is brokering somehow the deal, according to the Dallas Morning News.
Right.
Wow.
That's neither here nor there.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Back to your point. I know you're close with Chris Paul. Is he blameless in this situation?
Nobody's ever blameless, especially Chris Paul, because Chris Paul, anytime you're the leader, you share some culpability. But in fairness to him, I have not spoken. I called Chris Paul yesterday. I was not able to reach him. I have not spoken to him about this.
I don't think he's the perfect angel in this situation here. I do believe he deserves a measure of blame. Just as we spoke yesterday, he deserves, to me, the most blame for the Clippers' collapse. I wrote about this subject last night for ESPN.com, column that we'll post in the next couple hours.
Okay.
So I did my fair share of research into this.
Okay.
And I am with your conclusions here. I'm not going to overblow this. I'm not going to make a huge deal out of it. There has been some internal jealousy among those three players.
Sure.
There's been a little finger pointing back and forth among those three. I think at times the other two look at Chris Paul and they want him to be held a little more accountable. As you know, he is a battler. He is a scrapper. He is a fighter, and he is very demanding. He's as demanding as Kobe has been with his Laker team.
That is accurate.
But there's one huge difference between Chris Paul and Kobe Bryant. Cachet, rings. So, again, Chris Paul is a very good player. We've talked and talked about this. Is he a superstar? I can't give him the super yet until he at least gets to a conference finals. But these three players don't, let's just say this, bottom line, they don't exactly love each other.
Right.
They're fine with each other. They get along. Their issues are kind of on and off issues. I'm with you about that. That's why I don't want to overestimate them today.
Right.
But are they a band of brothers? No. So when you watch their body language on the court as they begin to crumble against the Houston Rockets in Game 6 and then in Game 7, you don't see closeness. You don't see tight-knit on the court. And to me, Chris Paul's leadership falls a little short because he's not close friends with those two other guys. Maybe they do tune him out because maybe he has been in their ear a little too much for their liking. Again, winning solves everything here. So if they had broken through, and as Doc said yesterday, and I agree with him, they were 1 quarter away from the conference finals. So let's not blow the whole thing up. And you know what? I'm with you about DeAndre. In the end, Chris Paul is a really good player. I do think his heart is in the right place. Even though they've all had their issues, most of them petty, I think they can figure them out. And I bring up the stat that I used yesterday. Over the last 4 years, these Clippers have had the 3rd best record in the NBA over 4 years since Chris Paul got there. That's behind the Spurs and the Thunder. That's pretty great, actually. That's something you should hang on to here in the wake of this epic collapse. You should not forget the fact that you've had that great regular season accomplishment.
Let me say this to you. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty here, because I was interested in hearing what you had to say. Number one, anytime you're the leader, you have some culpability. Nobody's trying to give Chris Paul the quote-unquote pass here.
No.
You're the leader of a franchise, you're a $100 million player, you're going to accept some culpability, not just when you fall, but about the personalities not coming together and being unified as one, okay? That's number one. Number two, I spoke to Doc Rivers, you know, briefly yesterday about it. He didn't talk to me about this because he was in a rush, but, you know, we were texting and he basically said, I could not get them over the hump in terms of their level of focus that they have for San Antonio. They didn't view Houston and San Antonio in the same, and he blamed himself because it's his job to get them to see Houston every bit as the threat that San Antonio was. And once they got past San Antonio, you know, essentially they got lax there. But I also put that on Chris Paul too, because if you played in 65 playoff games, okay, and you've never been to a conference finals, your hunger should have elevated to such astronomical proportions that nothing should have been allowed to be taken for granted. Not just with him, because I know he didn't do it, but he should have made sure the rest of them didn't do it. Having said all of that, let's also understand that I give Chris Paul small culpability in this equation compared to the other guys. Here's why. When we talked about Kobe, yes, it's not just, you know, Kobe won. But it wasn't just that he won. It was the dedication he put forth towards winning. As wrong as he may have been to call Shaq out years ago when he called Shaq out to Jim Gray, talking about he was fat and all of this other stuff, it also spoke to a level of frustration because as Shaq got older, towing around 300-plus pounds, you know, he's trying to relax at times like that. And Kobe's a workout warrior. He's working out. He's trying to keep himself in peak condition. He wants more championships. Well, he might not have handled it ideally, but what was the agenda? The agenda was about winning. How did we know that? Because when Dwight Howard didn't seem receptive to Kobe, nobody was trying to hear that because we were like, yo, you don't have 5 rings. He does. We ain't trying to hear it. Now, even though Chris Paul doesn't have any rings, the legitimate argument could be made, the feistiness, the pit bull mentality, and all of this other stuff. He wants it because winners who are dedicated and focused all want to play with Chris Paul. But if you look at a DeAndre Jordan, I'm not questioning him. I like DeAndre Jordan. I've repeatedly told DeAndre Jordan if the dude worked on his post game and hit some free throws, he'd be the best big man in the game.
And by the way, quick point of order.
Sure.
He has finished 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year the last 2 years.
That's right. And
so Chris Paul has benefited from that part. Okay?
He has benefited, and Chris Paul knows that.
Okay.
But if you know that you legitimately, listen, if we know that the Clippers only go 6 deep, you think Chris Paul didn't know that? So if he knows that, he's like, wait a minute. You're going to have to play. And I need you to hit these free throws. Don't, you know, you shooting 38%. Don't you think you need to be out here shoot from some free throws? If you play Griffin and you making all of these commercials just like he is, don't you think you need to show up in the 4th quarter? So he is going to challenge you on that. And my point is, you can get mad at him. That doesn't make it newsworthy. What makes it newsworthy if you think about leaving? Because if you DeAndre Jordan, excuse me, Skip Bayless, while I look into this camera, DeAndre Jordan, where the hell are you going? I mean, who are you going to play for? Because let me tell you something. DeAndre Jordan without a point guard is Dikembe Mutombo. You blocking shots. You rebounding. You winning. You a contender for Defensive Player of the Year. But offensively, you ain't doing a damn thing without a point guard. Because if you don't have Chris Paul penetrating into the teeth of a defense, throwing it up alley-oops, signifying Lob City, what are you going to bring to the table if you DeAndre Jordan?
Okay, is it possible that Chris Paul has just worn him out with his pit bullness, his demanding, complaining,
my answer to that would be a question to you. My answer to that would be a question to you. Would you find that acceptable for anybody when it comes to trying to win championships? You upset at somebody getting on you about your deficiencies when you know that it's a deficiency? Okay. Come on now.
They don't have anything to show for all that they're putting up with from their point guard. Again, 4 straight years of very good regular seasons, but you still can't get out of the 2nd round.
I ask you a question, Skip. When you watch the Clippers, and again, I hold Chris Paul with Doc as much as you know how much I love them brothers, but I hold them both accountable for that collapse in Game 6 because they're the leaders. You got to stop the bleeding. But outside of that collapse in Game 6, you tell me what game in the postseason that Chris Paul did have one bad game against the Spurs. That one bad. I think it was Game 3 if I remember correctly. But the point that I'm trying to make to you is that outside of that, Game 3 against the Spurs and a quarter in Game 6.
Right.
What else is there about Chris Paul? He wasn't the reason. This brother can play, man. And I'm looking at DeAndre Jordan. I love DeAndre Jordan's game defensively. Offensively, the alley-oops are just sensational to watch. But he has no post game. And he can't hit free throws, which means that for the most part, unless you're throwing him an alley-oop, you are playing 4-on-5 on the offensive end of the floor.
What do you think Blake Griffin thought when Chris Paul missed Game 1 against Houston? Remember Game 1 at Houston?
That's right.
Remember what Blake Griffin did? He went crazy.
That's right.
He had a triple-double with, if memory serves, 13 assists.
Nope, got to debunk that. Okay. Because he was going off throughout the playoffs. He was going off throughout the playoffs.
They won with no Chris Paul. They won at Houston.
But they won with Chris Paul against San Antonio. With Chris Paul. So I don't want to hear that. It's not like, oh, that's happened without Chris Paul, but with Chris Paul, something else happened. Oh, no. Blake Griffin had career numbers. The problem, Blake Griffin walked into Sunday, Game 7, averaging less than 30% shooting from the field and less than 4 points in the fourth quarter. You are a superstar in the fourth quarter? I can't find you? Come on now.
Okay, but
come
on now. The biggest come on now is what happened in the fourth quarter of Game 6 at home.
That's right.
You are the superstar, quote-unquote, leader of your team. And your team, at some point, you have to push the right button in one of those guys or in yourself.
I agree with that.
And my biggest issue, and this is what I wrote about in my column, Chris Paul isn't selfish enough. In the end, you say he's only 6 feet tall. Trust me, I know the Spurs, and from inside out, they are scared to death of him when he decides, give me the ball and get out of my way, as he did on the final play at Game 7 against the Spurs. Because he can be unstoppable when he plays mad. He's got that chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, but the problem with a 6-foot guard, devoid of the athleticism of a Russell Westbrook, a Derrick Rose, even an Allen Iverson. Listen to my point. Listen to my point. Okay. The problem with that, Skip, is that when it comes to the Clippers, because of what teams know Chris Paul has around him, when he gets in that mode, they stay home. Because, again, there are trees up there, and he's forcing shots over 7-footers. Listen, Blake Griffin is a star. DeAndre Jordan is a human highlight reel. I want to keep the nucleus in place. DeAndre Jordan should stay. But let's be clear about something here. Just like we're sitting here debating this, other teams know these guys' mental makeup, and they are not looked at as strong mentally right now. Nobody says that about Chris Paul. They don't say that about him.
I think they look at the collective psyche.
Right, collective psyche.
And it's not strong.
That's right.
Because it's not close-knit.
But like you said, a 4-time, 5-time world champion in Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich, 4-time champions in the Spurs with Ginobili and Tony Parker. What did you just say? Who do they fear? Why?
When he goes crazy.
I'm just saying, but who is it that they fear? You didn't say Blake Griffin?
They don't.
CP3, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and the Clippers are still without a conference finals appearance in 45 seasons as a franchise. Let's stay with free agents.